I need to say something that is going to be uncomfortable, and I need you to stay with me for a moment, because if you leave now, you're going to miss the only part of this life that really matters. My name is Evelyn. I'm 96 years old. And after being married to my husband Thomas for 64 years, I have to tell you that you probably married the wrong person. Please don't close your heart to that idea just yet, because understanding why that's true is the only reason Thomas and I made it through 6 decades of job losses, health scares, and the seasons where we genuinely could not stand the sight of each other. It is the complete opposite of everything you have ever been told about love, but it is the only thing that actually holds two people together when the world starts to shake. When I was 24, I married Thomas because he was handsome and steady, and he made me laugh in a way nobody else ever had. My mother cried happy tears at the wedding. My friends told me how lucky I was, and I walked down that aisle certain that I had found the one person I was simply meant to be with. But by year 3, that certainty was starting to crack. He left his shoes in the doorway every single night. He went quiet exactly when I needed him to talk. And he spent money in ways that made my stomach tighten with anxiety. We fought about his mother. We fought about my sister. And we fought about things so small I couldn't even tell you what they were now, though they felt enormous at the time. I remember sitting in our kitchen thinking I had made a terrible mistake, convinced that this wasn't what love was supposed to feel like, and that I must have chosen the wrong person. I was 27 with a toddler on my hip and a growing suspicion that I had ruined my life when I went to have coffee with my neighbor Dorothy. She had been married 35 years by then, and she had that kind of calm that only comes from surviving a great deal. I told her I wasn't happy, and that maybe Thomas and I just weren't right for each other. And I waited for her to tell me I deserved better. Instead, she looked at me over her cup and said that we all marry the wrong person, and the only real question is whether you're willing to make them the right one. It took me another 60 years to fully understand what she meant, but she was right. The first painful truth nobody tells you is that the person you marry is never the person you stay married to, because life changes you both in ways that are impossible to predict on your wedding day. The man I married at 24 was not the man I buried at 88. Thomas at 30 was ambitious and restless and a little bit reckless. But Thomas at 45 was tired and proud and sometimes unreachable. By the time he was 65, he had softened into someone who cried at films he would have mocked in his youth, and who held my hand in the car just because he could. At 82, he needed me to help him with his shoes, the very same shoes he'd been leaving in the doorway for half a century. I didn't just marry one man. I married a dozen different versions of him. And I changed just as much, moving from an insecure girl in my 20s to a woman who felt completely lost when my mother died at 49, only to rebuild myself into someone steadier and stranger by 60. We grew together, and sometimes that meant growing in different directions and having to find our way back to each other over and over again across the decades. You have to ask yourself honestly if you are still the same person your partner married. And of course, you aren't. Love isn't a permanent feeling you stumble upon. It's a decision you have to make every single day, especially on the days when you don't feel like it. I want to be honest and tell you there were years when I didn't like Thomas very much. There were months where I counted down the days until his fishing trips, just so I could have the house to myself. And there were nights I lay awake wondering what my life would have looked like if I had gone a different way. I remember one night, about 15 years in, when I was so angry that I actually packed a bag and sat on the edge of the bed thinking I could just leave. I didn't go, not because I was afraid, but because I knew deep down that what I was feeling was temporary and what we had built was permanent. I unpacked that bag and I chose him again. And that kind of active choosing changes you. It teaches you to look deeper than the habits that irritate you. For the first 20 years, Thomas's silence drove me mad because I took it as coldness or indifference. I fought against it for a long time, trying to pry him open and getting frustrated when he wouldn't give me what I thought I needed. But around year 25, I finally stopped fighting and started watching. And I realized his silence wasn't an absence at all. It was how he held things. He went quiet because he was taking life seriously, and because he cared too much to speak before he truly understood. Once I saw that, I stopped feeling abandoned by his quiet and started feeling held by it. I had spent a quarter of a century fighting a quality that was actually one of the most loving things about him, simply because I hadn't learned how to read it yet. We also have to stop believing the myth that marriage is 50-50, because that idea will break you the moment things get hard. In a real life lived together, you don't keep score. There was a year after my surgery when Thomas did everything, the cooking, the cleaning, and sitting with me through the long, terrible afternoons, without ever making me feel ashamed for my weakness. I could give him nothing but my presence, and he never once counted the cost. And then there were the years I carried us, like when he lost his job at 51 and went somewhere dark and quiet inside himself for a long time. I held us together because that was what was needed. Some years are 80-20, and some are 10-90. And that isn't a failure. It's just what happens when two humans try to walk the same path. The couples I've watched fall apart over the last 96 years almost always did so because someone started auditing the relationship like a business transaction. You cannot love someone fully while you are keeping a ledger of their debts. I even had a season around year 18 where I found myself looking toward a friendship with a man at my office because he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. He asked the questions Thomas didn't think to ask, and for a moment, I thought I was starving for something my husband couldn't give me. But when I went home and looked at Thomas, I realized the loneliness I felt was partly my own fault. I had stopped telling him what I was thinking, and I had decided he wasn't interested without ever actually giving him the chance to be. Your partner cannot be every kind of connection you need, but before you decide they've failed you, make sure you haven't already withdrawn. That night, I chose to reach back toward him. And while his response wasn't as dazzling as my colleagues, it was real, and it was ours. People often ask me if I married the right person, and I've come to believe the question doesn't even matter. The right person isn't someone you find through luck or destiny. It's someone you build together through a million tiny choices made on ordinary days. It's choosing to be kind instead of sharp when you're tired, and choosing to come back to the table after an argument instead of staying gone. If you are sitting with doubt today, wondering if you made a mistake, I want to tell you that you probably did. We all did. We all made permanent decisions based on temporary feelings and incomplete information. But that isn't a reason to leave. It's the place where a real marriage actually begins. Thomas has been gone for 8 years now, and in the quiet of this house, I think back to that afternoon in Dorothy's kitchen. I understand now that the rightness of a partner doesn't come before the marriage, it comes from it. It is forged in the hard seasons and the moments where you decide to stay and keep looking at the person beside you until you truly see them. Thomas became the right person because I kept choosing him, and I became the right person because he kept choosing me. That is the only love story that matters. So if you're struggling, don't wait for the feeling to return. Just do the work of seeing the person in front of you and ask yourself if you're willing to keep choosing them today. If you are, then you have everything you need. I chose Thomas for 64 years, and if I had the chance, I would choose him for 64 more. Please, take care of the person beside you. I'm Evelyn. I'll see you in the next one.